A black doctor saves a racist white woman's life. She then refuses to thank him. Dr. Amir Johnson leaned against the cool surface of the nurse's station, the fluorescent lights casting a sterile glow over the busy emergency room. He rubbed the back of his neck, exhausted after a grueling 12-hour shift. Just as he contemplated the pile of paperwork awaiting him, a sudden commotion erupted from the main entrance. "Code Blue! Code Blue!" a nurse shouted, her voice piercing through the steady hum of the hospital. Amir's heart raced as he straightened, instinctively shifting into professional mode. He grabbed the nearest stethoscope and dashed toward the escalating chaos. Crowds of medical staff converged around a woman lying on the floor. Amir's stomach twisted as he pushed through the throng, and then he froze. It was Victoria "Vicky" Reynolds, the affluent socialite whose scornful comments about black professionals had echoed in his mind long after their encounters. Vicky was well known in the community, not just for her wealth, but for her unapologetic opinions on race and class. This wasn't the first time he had heard her dismiss the capabilities of black doctors, and now here she was, gasping for breath. "A mime," seemingly oblivious to the irony of her situation. "Dr. Johnson, we need you," shouted a fellow physician, snapping Amir back to the present. He knelt beside Vicky, who lay pale and unresponsive. Her eyes fluttered open for a brief moment, but the panic in her gaze was unmistakable. Amir quickly assessed her vitals, noting the rapid heartbeat and shallow breathing. Anger surged within him, mingling with the urgency of the moment. He couldn't ignore the bitterness of her past comments, but as a doctor, he had taken an oath to save lives, no matter whose life it was. "Get me a crash cart," Amir commanded, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside. He positioned himself beside Vicky, placing his hands firmly on her chest as he initiated CPR. With each compression, memories of her disdainful remarks echoed in his mind. "I don't trust doctors who don't look like me," she had said at a charity gala, her voice dripping with condescension. It was infuriating, yet he pressed on, the rhythmic thumping of his hands against her chest merging with the beeping of machines in the background. The crowd around them began to murmur, some exchanging glances while others looked on in silent shock. The weight of their judgment felt like a heavy cloak draped over Amir's shoulders. Was he really going to save someone who had openly disdained him? But he couldn't let that stop him. He needed to focus. "Come on, Vicky, stay with me," he urged as he continued the compressions. Moments later, the paramedics arrived, their faces serious as they swiftly assessed the situation. One of them, a burly man with a buzz cut, took over CPR as Amir stepped back to catch his breath. He was still reeling from the emotional weight of the moment. "Dr. Johnson," the paramedic said, looking at Amir with a mixture of respect and disbelief. "You're gonna have to intubate her. We're losing her." Nodding, Amir directed the team, his voice unwavering as he took charge. "Let's stabilize her, get her on oxygen and prepare for transport to the OR." He felt the adrenaline coursing through his veins, fighting against the anger that festered at the back of his mind. The team sprang into action. Amir's focus sharpened, drowning out the noise around him as he concentrated on the task at hand. Vicky's life depended on him now, and he couldn't afford to let anything distract him. They carefully lifted her onto a stretcher, and Amir moved alongside, guiding the paramedics through the labyrinth of the hospital corridors. "Keep her airway open," he shouted, his heart pounding as they navigated the chaos. As they entered the operating room, Amir felt the familiar rush of determination wash over him. This was his domain, where skill and knowledge reigned supreme. He glanced down at Vicky, whose face was now ghostly pale, and for a moment he hesitated, memories of her sharp tongue resurfacing. But as he donned his surgical scrubs and mask, Amir pushed those thoughts aside. He needed to focus entirely on saving her life. "Let's prep her for surgery," he commanded, and the team moved with the precision of a well-rehearsed orchestra. As the anesthesiologist began sedating her, Amir reviewed the charts, noting the arrhythmia and the potential complications they might face. Despite the anger simmering inside him, it was imperative that he not let personal feelings cloud his judgment. Vicky's life was at stake. "Dr. Johnson," the lead nurse said, looking up from her station, "do you want to inform her family?" Amir paused, the question hanging in the air. Vicky's family had always held a certain esteem in the community, often attending charity functions and mingling with the elite. They wouldn't take kindly to the news that their daughter was fighting for her life, particularly in the hands of a black doctor. "No," Amir replied firmly, the decision solidifying in his mind. Let's focus on her first. We can deal with family after. The room fell silent as Amir positioned himself at the operating table, the bright lights above illuminating the stark reality of the situation. He glanced at Vicky, who was now unconscious and vulnerable. The weight of her prejudices felt inconsequential in this moment. She was just another patient, and he was the surgeon who would fight for her life. With steady hands, Amir made the first incision, the familiar sensation of skin giving way, grounding him as he focused on the task at hand. The world outside faded, and all that existed was the rhythm of the surgery, the beeping machines, the hushed voices of the surgical team, and the faint sound of his own heartbeat. As he navigated through layers of tissue, Amir's mind wandered. Had he made the right choice in saving her? Would she come to understand the weight of her words once she regained consciousness? His fingers deftly worked, but the questions lingered, gnawing at the edges of his concentration. "Dr. Johnson, we're losing her," the anesthesiologist shouted, breaking through his thoughts. The urgency jolted him back to reality. "Crank up the oxygen and prepare for a defibrillation," Amir barked, adrenaline surging once more. He felt the pressure mount as he battled against time and the unpredictability of surgery. With each beat of his heart, Amir focused on Vicky, pouring every ounce of his skill and determination into saving her life. The surgery was a dance of precision, and he was determined to lead, no matter how daunting the prospect of facing her afterward felt. As he reconnected her heart, the monitor's beeping stabilized, a glimmer of hope blossoming in the sterile environment. Amir couldn't shake the looming question of Vicky's perspective. Would she see him as a hero or merely as a tool of her survival? Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Amir stepped back, drenched in sweat, and let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "We did it," he said, glancing at his team, who nodded in relief. Vicky was stable, but the battle was far from over. As he washed his hands, Amir couldn't help but feel a mix of triumph and uncertainty. He had saved her life, but the internal conflict remained. Would she ever truly appreciate the gravity of what had just occurred? Or would she revert to her old ways, dismissing her savior as just another doctor? He took a deep breath, knowing he would find out soon enough. As the surgical team finished their cleanup, Amir stepped out of the operating room, the air cool against his flushed skin. The adrenaline that had surged through him during the surgery was now ebbing away, leaving behind a heavy fatigue. He leaned against the wall outside the OR, taking a moment to collect his thoughts. "Dr. Johnson!" a voice called out from behind him. It was Dr. Patel, one of his colleagues, her brow furrowed with concern. "I heard it was Vicky Reynolds. How are things?" Amir sighed, running a hand through his hair. "She's stable for now. We managed to correct her arrhythmia, but it's too early to say how she'll recover." Dr. Patel nodded, her expression shifting from concern to curiosity. "You know how she is. Do you really think she'll come around after this?" "I don't know," Amir replied, his voice heavy. "I just know that I did my job. Whether she learns anything from this experience is up to her." Dr. Patel's eyes narrowed slightly. "You're a better person than I am, Amir. I don't think I could be so forgiving." Amir offered a tight smile, the heaviness in his chest growing. "It's not about forgiveness. It's about my oath as a doctor. I can't let my personal feelings interfere." "Just be careful," she cautioned, her tone shifting to one of concern. "Vicky has a lot of pull in this community. You know how people talk." "I know," Amir replied, but his mind was already elsewhere. He needed to check on Vicky and ensure she was being monitored properly. With a nod to Dr. Patel, he headed down the corridor toward the recovery room. As he entered, the sight of Vicky lying unconscious on the bed pulled at him. The machines beeped steadily, and the nurses moved quietly, adjusting IV lines and checking monitors. Amir approached, his heart heavy with conflicting emotions. Vicky looked so fragile, her skin pale and unadorned by the makeup she usually wore. For a moment, he felt a pang of sympathy, but it quickly dissipated as memories of her sharp words resurfaced. "Dr. Johnson," a nurse said, breaking his reverie, "will keep her under close observation. She should wake up soon." "Thank you," Amir replied, his voice steady. He took a seat in the corner of the room, watching as the nurses worked. Time seemed to stretch, each minute feeling like an eternity. Eventually, Amir found himself lost in thought, reflecting on what had just transpired. The door creaked open, and Amir looked up to see Vicky's parents entering the room. They were both visibly shaken, and Amir could see the concern etched on their faces. Vicky's mother, A poised woman with perfectly coiffed hair rushed to her daughter's side, while her father stood back, arms crossed, his expression a mix of worry and skepticism. "Dr. Johnson," Vicky's mother said, her voice trembling, "is she going to be okay?" Amir stood, ready to reassure them. "She's stable now, but we need to monitor her closely. She suffered a cardiac event, and it's important she gets the rest she needs." "Thank you," Vicky's mother whispered, her eyes glistening with tears. "I don't know what we would have done without you." The words caught Amir off guard, and he felt a flicker of warmth in his chest. Perhaps this family, at least, could see the value in his work. But just as quickly, that warmth faded as he turned to look at Vicky, who still lay unconscious. "Do you know what happened?" Vicky's father interjected, his voice sharp. "Is this related to her lifestyle choices?" Amir hesitated, unsure how to respond without crossing professional boundaries. "We're still assessing all the factors, but it would be prudent for her to make some lifestyle changes moving forward." "Like what?" Vicky's father pressed, a hint of defensiveness in his tone. "Diet, exercise, and stress management," Amir said carefully. "But right now, the most important thing is her recovery." Vicky's parents exchanged worried glances, and Amir could sense the tension in the air. It was clear they were struggling to reconcile their daughter's privileged life with the reality of her health crisis. "I can't believe this is happening," Vicky's mother murmured, her voice breaking. "She was just at that gala last week, looking so vibrant." Amir felt a pang of empathy for them, but it was quickly overshadowed by the weight of Vicky's past comments. "I know this is difficult," he said gently, "but your daughter is in good hands. We'll do everything we can to help her." With that, Amir stepped back, allowing Vicky's parents some privacy while he kept an eye on the monitors. The next hour dragged on, filled with anxious glances and hushed conversations. Amir could feel the tension in the room. Every time the machines beeped or a nurse entered, Vicky's parents would hold their breath, hoping for good news. Finally, Vicky stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, confusion washing over her face as she took in her surroundings. Amir straightened, ready to step in if needed. "Mom? Dad?" Vicky's voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. "Vicky, we're here," her mother exclaimed, rushing to her side, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You scared us half to death." Vicky blinked, her gaze drifting past her mother to meet Amir's. Recognition flickered in her eyes, but it was quickly overshadowed by uncertainty. "Dr. Johnson," she murmured, her voice trailing off. "Yes, Vicky," Amir said, keeping his tone neutral. "You had a cardiac event. We had to perform surgery, but you're stable now." Vicky's eyes widened with disbelief. "You saved me?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implications. Amir nodded, trying to gauge her reaction. "Yes, but you need to take this seriously. Your health is at risk." She looked away, her expression shifting to one of annoyance. "I see. So it's about my lifestyle, right? You can't just fix me up and send me back to my life." Amir felt a flash of frustration. "This isn't about blame, Vicky. It's about your health and what changes you need to make to prevent this from happening again." Vicky drew herself up, her pride surfacing even in her vulnerable state. "I appreciate the surgery, but I'm not some statistic. I know how to handle my life." The air thickened with tension. Amir took a step closer, his voice firm but calm. "You're right, you're not a statistic. You're a person who needs to make serious changes to ensure your future. Ignoring the reality of your situation won't help you." The challenge in Amir's tone hung between them, but Vicky merely rolled her eyes, dismissing his concern. "I'll be fine. You don't know me." "Maybe I don't," Amir replied, his voice steady. "But I know what I saw in the operating room. You were fighting for your life, and that's not something to take lightly." Vicky's eyes narrowed, and Amir could sense her defensive walls going up. "You think you can lecture me now because you saved my life?" "I'm not lecturing you, Vicky. I'm trying to help you," Amir said, his patience waning. "But if you refuse to acknowledge the seriousness of your condition, you're only setting yourself up for failure." There was a beat of silence, the tension palpable. Vicky's parents exchanged glances, unease etched on their faces as they took in the exchange. Amir felt the weight of their scrutiny, but he stood his ground. "Dr. Johnson, please leave us," Vicky said, her tone icy. "I need to talk to my family." Amir hesitated, a surge of frustration welling up inside him. He wanted to push back, to challenge her dismissiveness, but he knew he needed to step away. "I'll be nearby if you need anything," he said, his voice low and controlled. As he left the room, Emir felt the heat of the confrontation linger in his chest. He couldn't shake the sensation of both anger and disappointment. He had saved her life, but she had refused to acknowledge the gravity of the situation. He walked down the corridor, the sterile scent of antiseptic filling his lungs as he tried to process what had just happened. Amir had hoped for a moment of connection, a glimmer of understanding, but instead he had been met with resistance. As he exited the hospital, the cool night air hit him like a wave. He paused, taking a deep breath to clear his mind. The world outside continued to spin, oblivious to the turmoil he felt inside. He needed to find a way to let go of the anger and disappointment that clung to him like a shadow. With a heavy heart, Amir drove home, determined to put the day behind him. But he knew that the battle wasn't over. Vicky would be a constant reminder of the prejudices he faced, and he couldn't help but wonder if she would ever truly understand the impact of her words and actions. The following morning, Amir awoke to the dull hum of his alarm clock, the sunlight filtering through the blinds of his small apartment. He rubbed his eyes, still feeling the weight of yesterday's events pressing down on him. Despite a fitful night's sleep, he knew he had to return to the hospital and face whatever awaited him. After a quick shower and a hasty breakfast, Amir grabbed his jacket and keys, mentally preparing himself for another day of uncertainty. The drive to the hospital was a blur of thoughts. He replayed the moments from Vicky's surgery in his mind, grappling with the weight of her dismissive attitude. Would she ever comprehend the gravity of her situation, or would she continue to live in denial? Upon arriving at the hospital, Amir was greeted by the familiar sights and sounds of the bustling medical center. He made his way to the surgical wing, where the air felt charged with urgency. As he entered the break room, he found a few colleagues gathered around the coffee machine, their chatter blending into a cacophony of gossip and speculation. "Did you hear about Vicky?" one of the nurses said, her voice low. "Yeah, I heard she's in recovery," another chimed in. "Can you believe she collapsed at that gala? I mean, of all places." Amir felt his stomach churn at the mention of her name. He poured himself a cup of coffee, hoping to drown out the conversation. But the whispers persisted, a reminder of Vicky's status in the community and the scrutiny he would undoubtedly face. "Dr. Johnson!" an enthusiastic voice called out, breaking through the noise. It was Dr. Patel again, her face lit with excitement. "How's Vicky doing?" Amir took a deep breath, trying to maintain his composure. "She's stable, but needs to take her recovery seriously. I'm concerned about her attitude toward her health." Dr. Patel nodded, her expression shifting to one of understanding. "It's tough when patients don't see the reality of their situation. But you know how people are, especially with someone like Vicky. They expect her to bounce back just because of her status." "Exactly," Amir replied, frustration creeping into his voice. "I did my best to save her, but it's like she doesn't want to acknowledge the reality of her condition. Instead, she's deflecting it all." "Don't let it get to you," Dr. Patel said, placing a reassuring hand on Amir's shoulder. "You did what you had to do. The rest is up to her. Just focus on the patients who appreciate your care." Amir nodded, but the words did little to ease the heaviness in his chest. As he made his way to Vicky's room, he steeled himself for another confrontation. The nurses had informed him that she had woken up earlier, but he couldn't shake the feeling of dread that settled in his stomach. Arriving at her room, Amir hesitated at the door, taking a moment to gather his thoughts. He could hear Vicky's voice, raised in agitation, as she spoke with her parents. "But I don't see why I can't just go home," Vicky exclaimed. "I feel perfectly fine." "Vicky, you need to listen to the doctors," her mother urged gently. "This is serious. You can't just ignore it." "I don't need a lecture, Mom. I know my body," Vicky snapped, her frustration palpable. Taking a deep breath, Amir pushed the door open, stepping inside. Vicky turned to him, her expression shifting from anger to annoyance. "Oh, great. Just what I need. Another doctor to tell me what to do." "Good morning, Vicky," Amir said, forcing a smile despite the tension in the air. "I wanted to check on your recovery." "Yeah, well, I'm fine. I don't need to be here," she insisted, crossing her arms defiantly. Amir glanced at her parents, who looked equally concerned and frustrated. "Vicky, you had a serious cardiac event. It's important that we monitor you closely for any complications. We can't just let you leave." But I feel good, Vicky argued, her voice rising. I can't believe I'm stuck in this hospital because of a minor issue. It's ridiculous. Vicky, Amir said, keeping his tone calm, this isn't a minor issue. Your heart stopped. That's why we perform surgery. Ignoring it won't make it go away. Her eyes narrowed, and Amir could see the gears turning in her mind. So what? You think I'm going to take your advice on how to live my life? I think you should consider the advice of your medical team, Amir replied, steadying his resolve. We want what's best for you, but if you're not willing to cooperate, we can't help you. Vicky's face flushed with anger, and Amir sensed the tension in the room rising. Her parents exchanged worried glances, unsure of how to intervene. I'm not a charity case, Vicky said, her voice dripping with disdain. I don't need you or anyone else telling me how to live. Vicky, please, her mother pleaded, stepping forward. This is about your health. You must take it seriously. Enough, Vicky shouted, her frustration boiling over. I don't want to hear any more about it. I'll do what I want. Amir felt his patience wearing thin. You may feel that way now, but you need to understand that this isn't just about you. It's about the people who care for you and the responsibility you have to yourself. Vicky's mouth opened in shock, but before she could respond, Amir turned to her parents. I suggest you talk to her about this. I'll give you some time. With that, he stepped back, leaving the charged atmosphere behind him as he exited the room. As he walked down the hall, Amir couldn't shake the frustration festering within him. It was exhausting to battle someone so resistant to change. He had dedicated his life to medicine, yet here he was, faced with someone who refused to acknowledge the very real consequences of her actions. Dr. Johnson, a voice called out, snapping him from his thoughts. It was one of the hospital administrators, a woman in her 50s with a no-nonsense demeanor. Can we speak for a moment? Of course, Amir replied, trying to mask the tension he felt. He followed her into a small conference room, where the atmosphere was far more subdued. I wanted to discuss the situation with Vicky Reynolds, she began, her tone serious. Her family is quite influential, and there's a lot of pressure to ensure she has the best care. Amir felt a knot tighten in his stomach. I understand, but my primary concern is her health. She needs to see the gravity of her condition. Yes, but we also have to consider the optics, the administrator said, her voice measured. Vicky's family is already on edge, and if we don't handle this delicately, it could reflect poorly on the hospital. So you want me to coddle her? Amir asked, incredulous. She needs to understand that her life is at stake. I won't compromise my medical integrity for the sake of appearances. Amir, I'm not suggesting you compromise your integrity, the administrator replied, her tone softening. But you need to find a balance. Vicky is a patient, yes, but she's also a public figure. We have to consider the potential fallout. Amir crossed his arms, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. Her health should come first. If she chooses to ignore my advice, that's on her. I can't sugarcoat the truth. I agree, but we also need to protect the hospital's reputation, she insisted. If you push too hard, it could backfire. Amir shook his head, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. I can't play politics when it comes to someone's life. I refuse to compromise on that. The administrator sighed, her expression sympathetic yet firm. I understand your passion, Amir, but you have to navigate this carefully. We're all in this together. As he left the conference room, Amir felt a mix of anger and frustration. He didn't want to play the game of politics. He wanted to save lives. But the reality of the situation was becoming increasingly clear. He was not just a doctor, he was a player in a larger game, one that often prioritized image over integrity. Returning to Vicky's room, Amir steeled himself for another encounter. He had to find a way to reach her, to make her understand the urgency of her situation without alienating her further. Vicky's parents were still present, their expressions a mixture of concern and frustration. Amir approached cautiously, ready to engage in the delicate dance of diplomacy. Vicky, he said, drawing her attention, I know this is difficult, but I want to help you. Can we talk? I don't see the point, Vicky replied, her arms crossed defensively. Let's talk about the reality of your condition. Amir pressed gently. What happened yesterday isn't just going to disappear. You have an opportunity to make changes that could save your life. Vicky's expression softened slightly, but her resolve remained. I don't need you to tell me what I already know. Amir took a deep breath, willing himself to remain calm. Then let's work together. You have the power to choose how you want to proceed, but you need to be open to the idea that change is necessary. Vicky's gaze faltered for a moment, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. Amir seized the opportunity, pressing on gently. Look, I understand that this is frustrating, but I promise you, I'm not here to lecture you or undermine your choices. I'm here to help you. Vicky remained silent, and Amir could see the internal struggle etched on her face. You're a strong woman, Vicky. You've achieved so much in your life, and I believe you can use that strength to overcome this challenge too. I've always been in control of my life, she replied, her voice slightly softer now. I don't need anyone telling me what to do. Then let's work together on this. You have the power to take charge of your health, Amir encouraged, his tone earnest. But you need to be willing to listen and consider the advice we give you. It's not about control, it's about your well-being. Vicky hesitated, and Amir could sense the walls around her beginning to crack. Her parents looked on, their expressions hopeful but cautious. What if I still want to do things my way? Vicky asked, a hint of defiance creeping back into her voice. Doing things your way doesn't mean ignoring the medical advice you're given. It means finding a way to integrate that advice into your life, Amir explained. You can still maintain control while also being smart about your health. It's about balance. I suppose I could consider it, Vicky said, her tone begrudging but more open than before. Amir felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps this was the breakthrough he had been waiting for. Let's start with a plan, Amir suggested, his mind racing for practical steps. We can set up a nutritionist to help you with dietary changes and a physical therapist to assist you with a fitness regimen. These changes don't have to be drastic, but they need to be consistent. Vicky frowned, clearly not thrilled with the idea of a dietitian. But I love my food. What's wrong with enjoying life? Nothing at all, Amir replied, smiling. Enjoyment is important, but it's also crucial to find ways to indulge that don't jeopardize your health. It's possible to enjoy food while making smarter choices. Vicky's brow furrowed, and Amir could see her processing the information. I suppose, but I'm not going to give up everything I love. Of course not, Amir reassured her. It's about moderation, not deprivation. And remember, you're not alone in this. We're all here to support you. There was a long pause. And Amir could feel the tension in the room easing slightly. Okay, Vicky finally said, her voice more measured. I'll think about it, but I'm not making any promises. Thinking about it is a start, Amir said, relief flooding through him. He turned to her parents, who were watching with a mixture of pride and concern. I'll arrange for the nutritionist to meet with you later today. We can take it one step at a time. Thank you, Vicky's mother said, her eyes shimmering with gratitude. I know this is hard for her, but I can see you really care. It means a lot. As Amir left the room, he felt a weight lift off his shoulders. He had managed to break through Vicky's walls, even if just a little. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but there was potential for growth on both sides. The day wore on, filled with meetings, rounds, and the usual chaos of the emergency department. Amir found himself reflecting on his conversation with Vicky, feeling a sense of cautious optimism. Perhaps she was beginning to understand the importance of her health after all. When he finally finished his shift, he left the hospital with a renewed sense of purpose. Amir had a plan for Vicky, and he was determined to help her navigate her recovery. But as he drove home, the weight of the world began to settle back in. That evening, Amir sat at his kitchen table, sifting through the paperwork that had accumulated during his shift. The phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. He glanced at the caller ID and saw it was Dr. Patel. Hey, Amir, she greeted him warmly. How did it go with Vicky today? Amir sighed, leaning back in his chair. It was a mixed bag. We had a breakthrough, but she's still struggling to accept the reality of her situation. That's understandable, Dr. Patel replied. Change is hard, especially for someone like her. But you're doing great work. Just don't take her resistance personally. I'm trying not to, Amir admitted, but it's frustrating. I see her potential, and I want her to see it too. Just keep being patient with her. You're making an impact, even if it doesn't feel like it right now, Dr. Patel encouraged. After their conversation, Amir felt a little lighter. He decided to channel his energy into preparing for Vicky's nutritional consultation the next day. He spent the evening researching heart-healthy recipes and lifestyle changes that could benefit her. The following morning, Amir arrived at the hospital early, feeling ready to tackle the day. He found himself eager to see how Vicky would respond to the nutritionist's recommendations. As he approached her room, he heard her voice raised in frustration once again. "I can't believe I'm wasting my time with this," Vicky exclaimed. Amir pushed the door open to find Vicky and the nutritionist seated together, the latter looking calm and composed, while Vicky's face was flushed with anger. "Good morning, Vicky," Amir said, stepping inside. "How's it going?" "Terribly," Vicky shot back, crossing her arms. "This is ridiculous. I don't need a dietitian telling me how to eat. I've been fine my whole life." "Vicky," Amir said, adopting a steady tone, "this is exactly what we discussed. You can't ignore the reality of your health. This isn't just about food. It's about your life and future." "I don't want to talk about it," she snapped, her frustration boiling over. "I don't need someone to dictate how I should live." Amir exchanged a glance with the nutritionist, who remained unfazed. "Vicky, I understand this is tough for you, but I'm here to help you find a way to enjoy your favorite foods while also protecting your health," the nutritionist said calmly. "It doesn't have to be all or nothing." "I don't want to hear it," Vicky shouted, her voice echoing in the small room. "I'm done with this. I'll figure it out myself." "Vicky, please," Amir interjected. "You're not alone in this. We want to support you, but you have to meet us halfway. This is a team effort." Vicky glared at him, her eyes filled with defiance. "I don't need a team. I need my life back." The tension in the room thickened, and Amir felt a familiar frustration bubbling within him. "You're right, you need your life back. But if you keep fighting against the very help that's available to you, you might lose it altogether." "Get out," Vicky shouted, her voice filled with rage. "Just get out. I don't want to hear from you anymore." Amir stood his ground, unwilling to back down. "I won't leave until you understand that you're making a mistake. Ignoring the advice won't make it go away, Vicky. You can't push away the people who want to help you." "Then I'll push you away," she retorted, her voice trembling with emotion. "You think you can just come in here and tell me how to live my life? You don't know anything about me." "I know enough to see that you're in danger," Amir replied, his voice steady. "You're fighting against your own recovery, but I can't help you if you refuse to accept that." Vicky's expression faltered, the anger in her eyes dimming momentarily. Amir took a step closer, softening his tone. "I care about your health. I'm not trying to control you. I just want what's best for you. I've seen too many people ignore the signs and pay the price." "Why does it always have to be about control?" Vicky asked, her voice quieter now. "Why can't I just enjoy my life?" "Because enjoying life shouldn't come at the expense of your health," Amir answered, his heart aching for her. "You can have both, but it requires effort and willingness to change. It's not easy, but it's worth it." The room fell silent, the tension hanging in the air like a heavy fog. Amir watched as Vicky's resolve began to waver, the fight slowly draining from her expression. "I'm scared," she finally admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "Fear is natural," Amir replied gently, "but facing that fear is part of the journey. You don't have to do it alone. We're here to support you every step of the way." Vicky looked down at her hands, her breath shaky. I don't want to be a burden." "You're not a burden," Amir reassured her. "You're a person deserving of care and compassion. Let us help you. You'll be amazed at what you can achieve." The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions for both Amir and Vicky. Despite her initial resistance, Vicky had begun to engage more with the medical team. She attended therapy sessions and met with the nutritionist, albeit reluctantly. Amir sensed a shift in her demeanor. The fire that had once blazed in her eyes was now tempered with a flicker of uncertainty and vulnerability. Amir, however, carried the weight of their previous confrontations. Each day, he found himself caught between his professional duty and the deep-seated resentment he felt toward her past behavior. He couldn't shake the memories of her dismissive comments about black doctors, which had left scars on his pride and spirit. One afternoon, Amir was reviewing Vicky's charts in the nurse's station when Dr. Patel approached him, her expression serious. "How's she doing?" "Better, I think," Amir replied, glancing up. "She's actually taking the nutritionist's advice seriously, but I can't help but feel like she's still holding back." "Change is hard, especially for someone like her," Dr. Patel said, leaning against the counter. But it sounds like she's trying. That's a win in my book. Maybe, Amir said, his voice laced with skepticism. But I worry it's just a facade. She's still the same person who looked down on me, and I don't know if she's capable of genuine change. People can surprise you, Dr. Patel replied. Sometimes it takes a crisis for them to see the light. Just give her time. Amir nodded, though he remained unconvinced. As he shifted his focus back to the charts, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. Vicky's progress was slow, and he felt the pressure mounting with each passing day. A few hours later, Amir was called to Vicky's room. As he entered, he found her sitting up in bed, a plate of food in front of her. The nutritionist had prepared a heart-healthy meal, but Vicky's expression was one of disdain as she poked at the vegetables. "What's wrong?" Amir asked, noticing her reluctance. "I hate this," Vicky said, her voice tinged with frustration. "I feel like I'm being punished for something I didn't even do." "You're not being punished," Amir replied, keeping his tone calm. "You're learning how to take care of yourself. This is a step toward a healthier future." Vicky rolled her eyes. "A future I didn't ask for. I was fine before all of this. Now I feel trapped." "Trapped?" Amir echoed, frowning. "You're not trapped, Vicky. You're in control. You have the power to make choices about your health and your life." "But I don't want to make those choices," she shot back, her frustration boiling over. "I just want things to go back to the way they were. I want my life back." Amir could see the anger and desperation in her eyes, and it broke his heart. "You can't go back," he said gently. "You need to move forward. This is your chance to redefine what your life looks like, but it requires work and commitment." Vicky looked down at her food, her expression wavering. "I don't know if I can do it," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "You don't have to do it alone," Amir encouraged. "We're all here to support you. You just have to take the first step." Vicky's silence hung heavy in the air, and Amir felt the weight of their shared history pressing down on them. He thought back to their earlier encounters, to the moments filled with tension and anger. "I know I've said some terrible things in the past," Vicky finally said, her voice shaky. "I don't know why I thought I could act that way and get away with it. I guess I thought I was untouchable." Amir took a deep breath, his heart softening. "You're human, Vicky. We all make mistakes. The important thing is what you do after. Acknowledging those mistakes is the first step toward growth." Vicky met his gaze, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I don't want to be that person anymore," she admitted, her voice cracking. "But I'm scared. I don't know how to change." "Fear is a natural part of the process," Amir said, his voice steady. "But you have to face it head on. It's okay to be scared. It means you care. Just take it one step at a time." "I'll try," Vicky said, her voice hollow but earnest. "I just don't want it to disappoint anyone." "You won't disappoint us," Amir assured her. "We're here for you, no matter what. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be willing to put in the effort." As he left her room, Amir felt a sense of hope creeping in. Perhaps Vicky was starting to understand the importance of her journey. But just as quickly, doubt settled back in. Would she truly commit to the hard work it would take to change? The following days saw Vicky engaging more with her therapy sessions and nutrition consultations. Amir watched as she slowly began to embrace the changes in her life, albeit with a mix of reluctance and determination. But just as things seemed to be improving, a storm loomed on the horizon. One evening, Amir was pulled into an emergency meeting with hospital administration. As he entered the room, he could feel the tension thick in the air. "Dr. Johnson, thank you for coming," the head administrator said, her voice serious. "We need to discuss the situation with Vicky Reynolds." "What about her?" Amir asked, a sense of foreboding creeping in. "She's been getting a lot of media attention," the administrator explained. "Her family is pushing for a more public recovery process, and they want us to support that." Amir's stomach sank. "You can't be serious. She just had a major health crisis. This isn't a publicity stunt." "I agree, but her family is influential," the administrator replied. "They want to showcase her recovery as an inspirational story, and they expect us to comply." "This isn't about marketing," Amir insisted, his frustration mounting. "This is about her health. If Vicky isn't ready for that kind of pressure, it could set her back." "I understand your concerns, but we have to consider the hospital's reputation," the administrator countered. If we can turn this into a positive narrative, it could benefit us all. Amir shook his head in disbelief. You're prioritizing publicity over patient care. This is exactly what I was afraid of. Dr. Johnson, please, the administrator said, her tone firm. We need to find a way to navigate this situation carefully. Vicky's family holds considerable power in this community. We can't afford to lose that. Anger flared within Amir as he fought to keep his composure. We can't sacrifice Vicky's well-being for the sake of appearances. If we push her into the spotlight before she's ready, it could have dire consequences for her recovery. Then what do you propose? The administrator asked, crossing her arms. I want to talk to Vicky before any decisions are made, Amir said, his voice steady. She deserves to have a say in her own story. The administrator hesitated before nodding. Fine, you can speak with her, but I need you to understand the importance of this opportunity for the hospital. Amir left the meeting feeling a mix of anger and resolve. He had to protect Vicky at all costs, even if it meant going against the tide of hospital politics. When he reached Vicky's room, he found her sitting up with her parents, who were animatedly discussing the latest updates on her recovery. As Amir entered, their conversation came to an abrupt halt, and Vicky looked up, her expression curious. Dr. Johnson, we were just talking about you, Vicky said, a hint of a smile on her lips. Good to hear, Amir replied, his heart racing as he prepared for the conversation. I wanted to talk to you about something important. Is it about my recovery? Vicky asked, her interest piqued. Sort of, Amir said, choosing his words carefully. I need to discuss the media attention that's been surrounding your recovery. Vicky's expression shifted, and Amir could see the flicker of apprehension in her eyes. What do you mean? Your family wants to showcase your journey as an inspirational story, Amir explained. But I'm concerned that this might pressure you into a situation you're not ready for. I can handle it, Vicky insisted, her voice firm. Can you? Amir asked, raising an eyebrow. This isn't about being strong. It's about being honest with yourself. You've been making progress, but that doesn't mean you're ready for the spotlight. Vicky's gaze dropped to her hands, and Amir could see the conflict brewing within her. I just don't want to disappoint them, she murmured. You won't disappoint anyone by prioritizing your health, Amir reassured her. This is your journey, not a performance for others. It's okay to set boundaries. Vicky's eyes glistened with unshed tears as she processed Amir's words. The weight of her family's expectations bore down heavily on her shoulders, and for a moment it felt suffocating. I don't want to let them down, she admitted, her voice shaking. You won't let anyone down by being honest about your needs, Amir replied softly. This is about your health and your journey. You're not a disappointment. You're a person who deserves to prioritize her well-being above everything else. Vicky took a deep breath, her expression wavering between fear and determination. But what if they don't understand? What if they think I'm giving up? Then you explain to them that taking care of yourself isn't giving up. It's taking control, Amir urged, stepping closer. You have the right to dictate your own path, and you don't owe anyone a performance. This is your story to tell. Vicky's gaze drifted to her parents, who were watching with a mixture of concern and admiration. Mom, Dad, what do you think? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Her mother stepped forward, placing a hand on Vicky's arm. Honey, we just want you to be healthy and happy. If that means stepping back from the public eye, then that's okay. Your health is what matters most. Vicky's father nodded in agreement. We can find other ways to support you without putting pressure on you to be a role model. Just focus on getting better. Tears streamed down Vicky's cheeks as she met Amir's gaze, gratitude shining through her vulnerability. Thank you for believing in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. Amir smiled, feeling a warmth spread through him. Always, you've shown incredible strength already. Embracing your journey means you're on the right path. With a newfound sense of clarity, Vicky turned to her parents. I want to take things slow. I need to focus on my recovery first. I'm not ready for the spotlight. The relief that washed over her parents was palpable, and Amir felt a sense of pride for Vicky. She was finally taking control of her life, and it was beautiful to witness. As days turned into weeks, Vicky continued to work with her team, gradually making strides in her recovery. The pressure from the media faded, allowing her to focus on what truly mattered, her health. Amir found himself increasingly invested in her progress. and each small victory fueled their connection. But just as Vicky began to flourish, Amir received an unexpected call from an old colleague offering him a position at a prestigious hospital in another city. The opportunity was significant, and Amir felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. He had been contemplating a fresh start, a chance to leave behind the burden that had weighed him down, yet the thought of leaving Vicky behind gnawed at him. He had become a part of her journey, and the bond they had formed felt precious to him. Amir wrestled with the decision, torn between career aspirations and the potential of a promising relationship. One evening, Amir sat down with Vicky, who was in the middle of a nutritional consultation. As the session wrapped up, Amir knew he had to share the news. "Vicky, can we talk for a minute?" She looked up, her expression curious. "Sure, well, what's on your mind?" "I received an offer for a new position at a hospital in another city," Amir said, his heart pounding. "It's a great opportunity for my career, but I wanted to talk to you about it first." Vicky's expression shifted from curiosity to concern. "You're considering leaving?" "It's not that simple," Amir replied, his voice steady. "I've been thinking about a fresh start, but I don't want to make any decisions that could affect our relationship. I care about you, and I want to know how you feel about this." Vicky paused, her brow furrowing as she processed his words. "I didn't realize you were unhappy here." "It's not that I'm unhappy," Amir clarified, "but I feel like I've been carrying a lot of weight, and this position could be a way to lighten that load. But I don't want to leave you behind." Vicky's eyes softened, and Amir could see the conflict within her. "I understand the opportunity is important, Amir. But what about us? I don't want to walk away from what we've built," Amir said, searching her gaze for understanding. "You mean a lot to me, and I want to be there for you as you continue your recovery." Silence enveloped the room, and Vicky's expression flickered between apprehension and resolve. "I don't want to hold you back from something that could be great for you. You deserve to pursue your dreams. But I also want to be there for you," Amir pressed, his heart aching at the thought of leaving her behind. "You're just starting to embrace this new chapter in your life, and I want to support you through it." "Maybe this could be a good thing," Vicky suggested, her voice thoughtful. "If you take this position, it might give me the space to grow on my own. I can't be dependent on you forever." Amir felt a pang of uncertainty. "But I don't want you to feel alone in this process. There's strength in support." "I know," Vicky replied, her voice firm, "but I need to learn how to be strong on my own too. If you leave, I'll have to find my own way, and that might just be what I need." Amir stared at her, wrestling with the conflicting emotions swirling inside him. "You really think it would be for the best?" "I do," Vicky said, a newfound determination lighting up her eyes. "You have the chance to grow, and I want you to take it. I'll be okay. Just like you said, I have to take control of my own life." With a heavy heart, Amir knew she was right. He had seen the strength within her, and it was time for him to trust that she could navigate her own journey. "Okay," he finally said, his voice steady. "I'll accept the position." Vicky's face lit up with a mixture of relief and pride. "Thank you for being honest with me. I know this isn't easy, but I believe in you, Amir." "And I believe in you," he replied, feeling a bittersweet sense of closure. They embraced tightly, and Amir felt the warmth of their connection wrap around him, a reminder of the journey they had shared. As the days turned into weeks, Amir prepared for his new role while Vicky continued her progress toward recovery. They remained in contact, sharing updates and encouraging one another as they both embarked on new paths. In the final moments before Amir left the hospital, he walked through the halls one last time, memories flooding back, moments of tension, vulnerability, and growth. He had witnessed Vicky transform, and in turn, she had helped him find clarity in his own life. As he stepped outside into the bright sunlight, Amir felt a sense of hope wash over him. The future was uncertain, but he was ready to embrace it. Vicky's journey had only just begun, and though they were stepping onto separate paths, he knew their stories would always be intertwined. You've made it to the end. If you enjoyed this story, I am confident that you'll love the next one appearing on the screen now. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and please give this video a like. I'll see you in the next one.